Putting your lessons there?
Yeah. Okay, so the first style of graphing we did was graphing using a table. This was our linear equation, 2x minus 1 is equal to y. We created our table, and then we chose numbers within our graph. Our graph went from negative 10 to positive 10. So we decided to use from negative 3 to positive 3 on our table. We took our first number, negative 3 for x, and we plugged it into the equation. We replaced our x with negative 3, and then we solved for our y. We discovered that y was negative 7, and our first coordinate was negative 3 and negative 7. So we plotted that point down here. We repeated the process. Our next number was negative 2, so we took negative 2, plugged it into the equation, and discovered that y was equal to negative 5. Our next coordinate was negative 2 and negative 5. So we plotted that point on the graph. And finally, the last one we decided to use was negative 1. Was negative 1. We plugged negative 1 into the equation. And we solved for y. We discovered y was negative 3. So our third coordinate we discovered was negative 1 and negative 3. We plotted that on the graph. From there, we figured out that we had a pattern. We were continuously going up by 2. So the next number after negative 3 was negative 1, then positive 1, positive 3, positive 5. We plotted those points along here, and we extended our graph. That was graphing using a table. The next style of graphing we used was graphing using slope and y-intercept. So, we had an equation here, and our equation was 2x is equal to y plus 1. In order to graph using slope and y-intercept, we must make sure the equation is equal to just y. So we had to rearrange this equation, and we brought the positive 1 over to the other side. We ended up with y is equal to 2x subtract 1. Once we did that, we were able to find our m and our b, which is our slope and our y-intercept. Our m was 2, and our b was negative 1. Since b is negative 1, that was our y-intercept, and we're talking about the solid line we drew. So our y-intercept was at negative 1. We decided to turn our slope into a fraction, which is 2 over 1. And slope is rise over run. So that means we go up 2, and then in the positive direction 1. So we went from our y-intercept up 1, 2, and over 1. And we repeated up 2, over 1. From there we connected the dots, just like in kindergarten, and we drew our line. We did it again with another equation. The other equation we had was 2y was equal to x minus 8. Again, this equation wasn't set equal to just y. We had to move the 2 to the other side. And when we moved the 2 to the other side, that means we had to divide. Since this is a multiplication, we had to divide both of the terms by the number 2. So we divided x by 2 and got x divided by 2. And we divided 8 by 2 and we got negative 4. Now we can rewrite our x divided by 2 as 1/2 times x. Okay? So that we can look at this in slope form. Once we did that, we got our m, our slope, and our b, our y-intercept. M was 1/2 and b was negative 4. So we plotted our y-intercept at negative 4. And we figured out our slope was going up 1 and to the right 2. So from that point, we went up 1 to the right 1, 2. And repeated up 1 over 2. Then we connected the dots, and we got our new line. Finally, the last style of graphing we used was finding y-intercepts and x-intercepts. Okay? Now, when finding y and x-intercepts, we already know one coordinate. When we're on the y-axis, we already know our x is going to be 0. So we started with just 0, and we plug that value into our equation to solve for the y. We plugged 0 in for x, and discovered that y was equal to -1. So, 0 and -1 was our y-intercept, which is right here. We did the exact same thing with an x-intercept. The only difference is, on our x-axis, that's when y is 0. So we already knew that was 0, so we plugged in 0 for y in the equation, sorry, this equation up here. We had 2x minus 1 is equal to 0. And then we solved for the x. We moved the 1 over, it became +1. And when I moved the 2 over, I had to divide by 2, because this is technically 2 times x. So our x-coordinate is x is equal to 1/2. So our x-intercept was 1/2 and 0, which is right in between the 1. Once we had the 2 dots, we connected it and extended our line. And that was slope using xy coordinates. The very last thing we did, adding and subtracting polynomials. We set up our equation so the variables are in the same column. X's are all together, y's together, and constants were together. And we added them. 2x plus 3x is 5x. -3y plus +2y, -1y. 4 plus -5 is -1. We did the same stuff with subtracting. We used the same formulas. We lined up the columns, x's with x's, y's and y's, and constant together. 2x minus 3x is -x. -3y minus 2y, so that looks like this. -3 minus +2 is -5. And 4 minus -5 looks like this. 4 minus -5 is +9.